Is there an intelligence or force that provides governing laws to all of consciousness? Where are these laws spoken of throughout historical and spiritual material? Come on, let's access the Akashic records on eternal and natural law. Welcome back to Accessing the Akashic Records, a brief history of eternal and natural law. It's great to be back after a long hiatus. Had a family illness that we managed to get on top of. Also spent a lot of time travelling, so left very little time for any spare time or any videos because we moved away for a while, quite a way out of town, so travel consumed a lot of our time. But those things have eased now. Should be back into making regular videos from now on. So without further ado, let's get stuck into eternal law and natural law. So law in ancient times was understood to be given to us from an eternal divine source, and even for some, such as the Gnostics and the Stoics of ancient Greece, they said the divine spark within guides us to live in accordance with this natural law. Just exactly what these laws are, I will cover in the next episode, but some background is basically required before covering this vast topic. But basically, eternal law and natural law contain principles that govern the dynamics of consciousness and is the cosmic order within the mind of the all. The oldest record that we have of people living by these forms of laws is in Sumer, which became Mesopotamia and is today known as Iraq. In Sumer, there was a mythology of the holy laws of heaven and earth. This was known as Me. So basically a set of universal immutable laws that the gods and mankind are subject to. Could this be the true etymological origin of the word we use today, me, and its origins are actually describing the laws in which our individual identity, me or I, is subject to? Sort of a symbol of how our portion of consciousness can use its own free will within these confines, within these boundaries. Very interesting observation, is it not? I haven't found anything concrete to say that yes, this is the etymological origin and where it came from, but certainly something to keep in mind. Important that you take note of the symbols used in this glyph here that I've got in front of you, as it will help put others that I've got further on in the presentation into perspective. In the middle we have what can be considered to be the tree of life, with two figures either side, a god and a human. Also the wings coming from the god disc up in the top centre, believed to represent a left and right hand path or duality, and on that god above them is where the me's or the eternal law and natural law comes from. So it comes down from this governing force. So the next oldest record that we have of people living by these forms of law is in ancient Egypt in the Cometian goddess Ma'at. But if you consider other materials such as the Casey readings of the Akashic records, the Law of One material, the Emerald tablets, and various other material, various scientific discoveries such as sunken cities, ancient structures. You've got tons and tons of places where obvious signs of advanced civilizations existed in the ancient past, before cataclysms and whatever else, an obvious great flood. So if you do take all that into consideration, then it certainly paints a very different picture to what modern science is telling us is the truth at the moment. Not to say they won't hopefully change their perspective as the truth comes further to light. So, as we are told, within the Law of One, the logos or creative principle of love is the second distortion or manifestation after free will, and the sub-logos is the sun, hence the veneration for the sun in Cometian mysticism, as well as in many countless other religions, just like the symbol of the Sumerian god, as you saw in the previous picture. So this Cometian wisdom that is believed to have come from Atlantis, if you take into account everything I mentioned, was destroyed in a great flood, but Ma'at symbolises truth, balance, order, harmony, law, morality, justice, or to sum it up, she is the Logos archetype, which I just spoke of in the Law of One. The archetype from natural law, could be said. So it's these virtuous moral principles, and to live in accordance with natural law is how you transcend or ascend to these higher realms that were spoken of. So Ma'at is depicted as a tall woman squatting in a stable pose upon a stone foundation, representing the stable base of eternal truth, which is natural law and eternal law. She has two outstretched arms with wings that symbolise the left and right hand paths of positive and negative or duality, which I've already covered in depth in older episodes. So go back and watch them for more background on that, but I'll also cover it more in the next episode. Now she wears an ostrich feather upon her head, which determines the destination of departed souls in their heart. If their heart is actually lighter than the feather, meaning they have lived in accordance with natural law, and that they move on to these higher states of consciousness after this life, should their heart be lighter than the feather. Now, Hermeticism is potentially just as ancient as the Atlantean Cometian wisdom, and describes principles in which I would say are the best descriptions of eternal law principles that are known as the 7 Hermetic principles. They describe governing dynamics in creation, which are very evident when combined with what we know from science, math, philosophy, geometry, so on and so forth. The Hermetic concepts go hand in hand with the Law of One concepts, which I will go into detail in the next episode and explain that more. So the next oldest record we have would be the Hindu and Buddhist concepts of Rata and Dharma, Rata and Dharma, which would be attributed to the creation and what we now call eternal and natural law respectively. Rata in Sanskrit means order, rule, law and truth, but in the Hindu religion also means the eternal cosmic order which makes life possible. So it's basically the same definition of eternal law that I gave earlier. Dharma signifies behaviours that are in harmony in accordance with Rata, eternal law, and is known as the path of righteousness. It includes duties, rights, laws, conduct, virtues. It's basically the same definition of natural law and the right-hand path as described in the Law of One and various other occult and mystical religions and beliefs. As many already know, karma is an inseparable concept of dharma, in that if you do what is right and good, then positive karma will follow. Vice versa for behaviour out of harmony with rata. So, negative karma. Okay, next we have the Tao Te Ching. Tao meaning way, Te meaning virtuosity, integrity, divine power and morality. Ching meaning canon or great book or classic. So we can basically say it's a canon book that describes the way in which to live in dharma or in harmony with eternal and natural law. If you're not familiar with it, it's the Chinese book. Also in the Middle East, there was within Jewish mysticism what is called as Kabbalah, which among many concepts describes two pillars or paths: a left pillar of severity and destruction, which implies consequence or karma, and the right pillar of mercy and of all creation, which implies relief and evolution. While the Kabbalistic tree of life doesn't actually tell you which path to follow, unlike the previous material I cited, it certainly tells you the results of behaviours that are negative or positive or of a neutral nature. So the left and right hand path is glaringly obvious within the Kabbalah. Since tarot is closely tied to the Kabbalah, let's discuss that next. So the tarot is an allegorical story that describes many facets of consciousness, just as Kabbalah does. And when laid out upon the Sephirah or tree of life, we can lay out the left and right hand paths to reveal the same concepts of eternal and natural law. The card at the top of the Ketha position of the tree of life is the Justice card, which represents eternal and natural law. Morality, virtuosity, integrity, truth, honesty, life lessons, cause and effect, so on and so forth. So as you can see, the picture shows a kingly person, a kingly female, which represents that the law is king, which is the term lex rex in Latin. Law is king. So it's not talking about man's law, it's talking about the eternal and natural law. So it's basically saying the only natural authority for humanity, basically. The person is sitting on a stone throne, again representing the stable base of truth, which is eternal law, and which eternal law and natural law are based on. In the background are a left and right pillar representing the two paths. In the person's right hand is a double-edged sword symbolising impartial judgment. So whatever your actions, whether they're of a positive or negative polarity, your actions determine this impartial nature of justice, of law. And the consequence of those actions is impartial. It is what it is, truth, left or right. So it is pointed up, signifying right behaviour leads to evolution. The left hand being pointed down is for the opposite, which contains the scales of judgment for the heart to weigh less than the feather, but also represents the concept that intuition must be balanced with reason or logic. So in the centre of the crown is a square which represents truth and clarity of thought. A white shoe pointing out from under the robe signifies that resulting justice or decision is from the path you actually chose to walk in life. In the Abrahamic religions, in particular the Bible, there's tons of reference to natural law, both direct and indirect. The most well-known probably being the story of Adam and Eve, where they eat the fruit from the tree of life, and that gives exposure to good and bad. Obviously, morality, virtuosity, dharma, karma, and so forth are revealed in a veiled allegorical manner. Plus there's straight forward principles and commandments to live by. I'm sure I don't need to go into too much depth. If you were brought up as I was, then you've had plenty of exposure to that material, but it's obvious with eternal law and natural law concepts throughout. So religion is not the only place in which we find the concepts of eternal law and natural law. There's been an abundance of individuals who've done the great work of expounding upon this information and bringing it to the forefront of human consciousness. Probably none more so than the Catholic monk and philosopher Thomas Aquinas, whom I will be doing a whole episode on, as it warrants being told, despite his affiliation with the church that has become a gatekeeper of sorts, or even completely replaced the very authority of eternal law and natural law in many cases. But that's a topic outside the scope of this episode. Anyway, Aquinas has defined 4 types of laws: eternal law, natural law, divine law, and man's law, that are in hierarchy in that order. So I will cover that more. It'll make more sense when I do an episode on him, and in the next episode it'll make more sense also. Feel free to go do your own research if you wish. Albertus Magnus, he was another huge Catholic proponent of this eternal law, natural law philosophy. Aristotle is considered to be the father of natural law in the field of philosophy, with his positing of the existence of natural justice and right. Plato, who referred to natural law and said the ideal community is a city which would be established in accordance with nature. The Stoics, whom I already mentioned at the beginning there. Cicero, the Italian philosopher, who wrote that justice and law originate from what nature has given humanity. As that quote says, for as nature has marked the bounds of everything else, so he has marked the bounds of life. Very telling about what natural law entails. So early Gaelic Irish law, which was called Brehon law, it mentions a number of places, in a number of places, a concept called rect agned, probably butchering that pronunciation, but basically it's a concept of natural law. Lawyer and jurist Sir Edward Coke brought natural law into the judicial system of England in the 15 to 1600s. In the 1600s, barrister Sir Matthew Hale wrote a treatise on natural law, which was popular in the 18th century and was actually republished in 2015 as known as Of the Law of Nature. In it, he wrote that natural law was antecedent, preparatory, and subsequent to civil government, and stated that human law cannot alter natural law, meaning it is immutable. In the 17th century, we had Thomas Hobbes, who was somewhat of a reductionist, who removed the eternal spiritual nature behind natural law, reducing it to a far more materialistic, savage nature of self-interest and preservation, which is ultimately the left-hand path. He was responsible for the formation of early legal positivism. While he's against the side of natural law and eternal law that I'm promoting, he was a proponent nonetheless, but changed it, tried to change the divine side of. Okay, moving on. We even have the founding fathers of the USA who wrote in reference to natural law within the Declaration of Independence. So I'll read out a couple of excerpts here. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and co-equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Unalienable meaning they cannot be taken away. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their power, their just powers, from the consent of the governed. And the next excerpt, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. Emphasize abolish it. And to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organising its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. The Declaration of Independence. Beautiful. So I don't know about you, with me or not, but I think we need to remove this government and create a new one which is based on eternal law and natural law. Which leads us to John Locke, who was pretty much the main influence and probably, as many say, was outright, had his philosophy outrightly plagiarised for the Declaration of Independence. But anyway, so as you can see, he influenced the writing of the Declaration of Independence with his idea of unalienable rights. Locke believed that the government was supposed to protect an individual's unalienable or natural rights. Locke stated that these rights were life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness that cannot be taken from you without due process. So there's been many other individuals, many people, such as philosophers, jurists, lawyers, activists, researchers in more recent times, which I'll briefly cover, such as the man in front of you is a fellow Aussie, John Finnis. There's Americans, Jermaine Grisez, Robert P. George, Canadian Joseph Boyle, Brazilian Emilio Brasileiro. Also a couple of my favourite American anarchists, Lysander Spooner, Mark Passio. There's Lysander Spooner, a great man who was a very prominent anarchist who spoke of natural law greatly. Here's a quote saying, "Man's natural rights are his own against the whole world, and any infringement of them is equally a crime, whether committed by one man or by millions, whether committed by one man calling himself a robber or any other name indicating his true character, or by millions calling themselves a government." Very powerful words in this day and age. So there you have it, a fairly broad but brief overview and history of eternal law and natural law, and there's plenty I know I have actually left out, let alone the rest that I don't even know about. But in next episode, I'll, as I said, I will cover precisely what eternal law and natural law is and why it's so important for our evolution. So here I'll read these couple of great quotes from Thomas Jefferson and Samuel Adams. Jefferson says, "A free people claim their rights as derived from the laws of nature and not as the gift of their magistrates. The natural liberty of man is to be free from any superior power on earth and not to be under the will or legislative authority of man, but only to have the law of nature for his rule." That is the most powerful quote there. I absolutely love it. So, in closing, know there is no other authority other than eternal law and natural law. You are all sovereign, equal, and divine in nature. So please hit like, subscribe, share this video, hit the bell so you don't miss a single episode, and please share this information around. It's very important. I don't mind if you plagiarise it or whatever, do as you will, just get it out there. Love and light, namaste.